now available on e-readers everywhere. From the author of the Simp Trilogy, Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance. Manginas, they look like men, but they act like ladies. And the misadventures of Captain Sable comes, Stop Simping in the Workplace. Learn what mistakes not to make with women and protect your job with Stop Simping in the Workplace. Available on e-readers everywhere. Last week I made a video discussing an incident here in Queens where an older Asian male wound up stabbing a teenager to death over a computer terminal where they wanted to play video games. And I made some mistakes in that report. Now, in the previous video I talked about how the man was 56, but the man was actually 51. But he did stab and kill a teenager due to the argument they were having over this computer terminal. Now, I look at that incident again, and it clearly is an example to me of how we are raising males and why they are pretty much falling apart these days because of the way we are raising males. Because when I look at that situation, I see a group of young teenagers who do not have the critical thinking skills to understand how to conflict resolve when it comes down to a situation where things aren't going the way they would like them to do. And when I look at that situation, I saw what I see in many black parts of the black community where these males got emotional, they started taking it personal, and they went and acted on impulse instead of thinking critically about their behavior. Now, these three Asian males walked into this internet cafe. They wanted to sit together, and they saw this homeless man sitting at one of the terminals, and they asked the man to get up, and the man said he was pretty much spending his time there because he had paid his money, and he was sitting at the terminal, and that was his right. But these guys, because they were pretty much thinking like females, were all caught up in the emotions of, one, playing this video game, and two, sitting together to play this video game, feminine traits. So they get into an argument with this guy, they punch him in the face, the guy fights back, he pulls out a hammer at one point, and you would think, again, when you see this guy pulling out a hammer, that you would think this guy is pretty much has mental health issues and we need to leave this guy alone. But these guys continue to persist, getting into a fight with this guy. They get beat up, and then they leave the internet cafe and then go back out and then go get another friend to go confront this guy over this terminal for this video game. When you look at that behavior, again, that is dysfunctional behavior, and it clearly shows that these boys were not taught the life skills they needed to understand conflict resolution and critical thinking. Because this situation, again, could have been easily resolved by just going to the manager and asking them to deal with the situation, or just finding some other computer terminals in this internet cafe to go sit at. Because if you're playing the game, it doesn't really matter if you're all sitting together. Unfortunately, these males did not have the critical thinking skills that only a man could teach another man, or the conflict resolution skills that a man could teach another man. No, these guys were pretty much caught up in their emotions over sitting together and playing this video game, that they were only thinking about how they felt about not being able to sit together, that they wanted to bully this homeless man. And when they saw the situation escalating, they didn't understand to, walk away from the situation before they did something that they would regret. No, the first thing they did was punch the guy in the face and try to attack him. And then when he fought back, they were going to come in and then go get this other guy. And then when he comes back to the other guy, who's 19 years old, that sadly, it leads to this man losing his life because these three males didn't know how to conflict resolve or to critically think about that situation. And that's what's really sad about reading that story and watching it on the news, is that here we had three teenagers who didn't understand that if you see a man sitting at a terminal and the terminal is blank, to critically think and say to themselves, then maybe we need to stay away from this guy because he could possibly have some mental health issues. No, they were so caught up in playing that video game that they couldn't think, hey, if this guy is like this, then maybe we need to think about some important intangibles of manhood, such as our dignity and our safety. Because when a man is thinking critically, he says to himself, okay, if I can't sit there, I will find another place because my dignity and my safety are more important than this video game. This is something many boys don't learn, again, because there is no man there to teach them how important the intangible of dignity is, because that means you understand that there is something worth more than these things like video games. And the things that are more important than a video game is your health, your safety, and your life. And this is something many males aren't learning because they're learning that things are more valuable than they are. And this is a lesson that I had to learn way back in 1980, in the 1980s, when I was a kid. Now, when I was a kid, my father used to take me to the barber shop for haircuts. And one of the first lessons I learned at the barber shop was patience, because when you're at the barber shop, you have to wait to get a haircut. Then the other lesson I learned at the barber shop was that I had to take my allowance, because he gave me $5 one time and I had to pay for this haircut. And that taught me responsibility. And another lesson I had learned one time when I was with him was when I was going to go play a video game, was that, once you put your quarter in and you play your game, you pretty much lose the game. And once the game is lost, you suck it up and move on. You don't continue to go out here and do things that sacrifice your dignity just to play more video games. You may have liked playing a video game, but there's other things that are more important. And that lesson was reinforced to me back in 1988 one time when I went to a pizza parlor in Washington Avenue, and I'd ordered a large pizza pie. I had saved up to go buy this pizza. And one of these kids was playing this video game, this Karate Champ game, and he was sitting there trying to pretty much dictate how the game was going to be played by everyone. And he comes up to me and asks me for a quarter. I say I don't have a quarter, and he continues to press, begging for the quarter, continuing as I'm waiting for this pizza to be cooked, and continuing to try to get into it with me over this video game. And as the thing escalated, I literally had to leave the store, and the guy follows me out of the store, all because I won't give him a quarter to play this video game. And what I learned from that experience at 14 years old was, one, I had to keep my distance from many of these males out here because they pretty much have very poor discipline and self-control. And two, how sad it is that you have a young male who doesn't understand what boundaries are because his parents didn't teach him discipline and self-control over things that are unimportant. Because, again, your dignity should be more important than a video game. And this male, back in 1988, he didn't learn that lesson about dignity, because when you are so caught up in playing a video game that you're willing to sacrifice your dignity to the point where you're going to ask strangers for quarters to play that video game, it shows that you have not learned anything regarding the character of what it means to be a man. And as a boy, you aren't being taught lessons in manhood that are going to help you be a man of character, because a man does not go out here and beg for things like a quarter to play a video game. Basically, that's what happens when a boy does not learn something as important as the intangible of dignity and self-respect. Because when you're out here begging for that quarter for a video game, all you're telling the world is that nobody needs to respect you because you do not respect yourself. Because you're saying that video game has more value to you than the intangibles related to your character of manhood, such as your dignity and your self-respect. And those three Asian boys who went in there to fight this homeless man over that video game and those computer terminals, they were sending a message to the world that they had no dignity and no self-respect, and that they were willing to sacrifice their dignity and self-respect and their self-worth all to play a video game at an internet cafe. And that's what the sad lesson that is not people aren't learning from this whole violent incident, is that these boys did not learn the life lessons that they needed to understand about critical thinking, problem resolution, and the intangibles related to dignity and self-respect. Because a man who goes into a place like I do all the time, I go to a public library to go on the internet, and sometimes they have these outlets there, and you can use them to charge your computer or plug your laptop in. And I understand that if I get there and all the outlets are pretty much being used, then that's my fault, and I have to deal with it. And if I want to go and use those outlets, I need to come in at a certain time, and that's just how it is. I have to come in at a certain hour to get access to them, and that's just how it is. But sadly, many of these males out here, they're not being raised to understand dignity, self-respect, and responsibility. And they go out here and they believe that because they all show up together, they are entitled to certain things like being able to sit together in an internet cafe. And this is, again, something that your parents have to teach you at an early age about discipline and self-control, that sometimes you don't get to sit where you want to, you don't get what you want, and you have to just suck it up and work with what's there. And this is something that many boys aren't being taught as meant to learn, and it's leading to really more and more dysfunctional boys growing up to become more and more dysfunctional males. And these dysfunctional males are pretty much getting themselves into trouble that they could easily avoid. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.